The morning sun was just breaking over the highway when the emergency call came in. A 3-car accident on Interstate 95, with multiple injuries reported. David Rodriguez had been a paramedic for 8 years, and he knew that every second counted in situations like this. David grabbed his medical bag and rushed to his ambulance. His partner, Lisa, was already starting the engine. They had worked together for 3 years and made a great team. David was known throughout the Emergency Medical Services Department for his calm under pressure and his ability to save lives when things looked hopeless. As they raced toward the scene, David could see the smoke rising in the distance. His radio crackled with updates from dispatch. 3 vehicles involved, at least 4 people injured, possible fatalities. David's heart rate increased, but his mind stayed focused. This was what he had trained for. When they arrived at the accident scene, David could see it was bad. A pickup truck had rear-ended a small car, which had then spun into oncoming traffic and been hit by an SUV. Glass and metal were scattered across the highway. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air. David and Lisa immediately got to work. They had their medical supplies and were trained to handle exactly this type of emergency. David approached the first vehicle where a woman was trapped inside her car. She was conscious but bleeding from a head wound. "Ma'am, I'm David. I'm a paramedic, and I'm here to help you," he said in his calm, reassuring voice. "Can you tell me your name?" The woman looked up at him with frightened eyes. "Jenny. My name is Jenny. I can't feel my legs." David knew this was serious. He needed to stabilize her neck and check for spinal injuries before moving her. He was just beginning his assessment when he heard a loud voice behind him. "Hey, what are you doing there?" David looked over his shoulder and saw a police officer walking toward him. The officer was tall and heavy-set, with a stern expression on his face. His name tag read Officer Walsh. "I'm a paramedic, sir. I'm treating this patient," David replied politely, not taking his attention away from Jenny. "I didn't ask for any paramedics yet," Officer Walsh said, his voice getting louder. "You need to step away from that vehicle." David was confused. This was standard procedure. When there was an accident with injuries, paramedics responded automatically. They didn't need permission from police officers to do their job. "Sir, dispatch sent us here. This woman has possible spinal injuries. I need to stabilize her before we can move her," David explained, still maintaining his professional tone. Officer Walsh moved closer, and David could see the anger in his eyes. "Are you questioning me? I said step away from the vehicle." Other emergency responders at the scene began to notice the confrontation. Lisa looked over from where she was treating another patient. Fire department personnel stopped what they were doing to watch. This wasn't normal. David took a deep breath. He had dealt with difficult police officers before, but this felt different. There was something personal in the way Officer Walsh was looking at him. "Officer, I understand you're in charge of the scene, but this woman needs immediate medical attention. I'm certified to provide that care," David said, pulling out his official paramedic identification card. Officer Walsh barely looked at the ID. "I don't care what that says. You're interfering with my investigation." "I'm not interfering with anything. I'm trying to save someone's life," David replied, his voice still calm but with a hint of frustration creeping in. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Other drivers who had been stuck in traffic were getting out of their cars to see what was happening. Someone had their phone out and was recording the interaction. Jenny, the woman in the car, was getting worse. David could see that her breathing was becoming labored. She needed oxygen, and she needed it now. But Officer Walsh was standing between him and his ambulance. "Sir, please, this woman is going into shock. I need to get my oxygen tank from the ambulance." "You're not going anywhere until I say you can go," Officer Walsh snapped. "I want to see some real identification, not this fake card you're showing me." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. His paramedic license was real, issued by the state, and he had every right to be there. More importantly, he had a duty to provide medical care to injured people. "This is a real license, officer. I work for the city's emergency medical services. I've been a paramedic for 8 years. 8 years of what? Pretending to be a real first responder?" Officer Walsh's voice was getting louder and more aggressive. Lisa had finished stabilizing her patient and came over to help. "Officer, I can vouch for David. We work together. He's one of the best paramedics in the city." Officer Walsh turned his attention to Lisa. "Did I ask you anything? Stay out of this." The fire department captain, who had been watching the situation unfold, finally stepped in. "Officer Walsh, these paramedics are legitimate. They respond to all our calls. We need to let them do their job. I'll decide who does what at my scene," Officer Walsh replied, not backing down. David looked back at Jenny in the car. Her eyes were starting to close, and her skin was getting pale. Every minute that passed was putting her life in more danger. "Look, I don't know what the problem is here, but that woman is dying. I took an oath to help people, and that's what I'm going to do." David started to move toward his ambulance to get the oxygen tank. Officer Walsh immediately stepped in his path. "You're not going anywhere. In fact, you're leaving this scene right now." "What? I can't leave. These people need medical attention." "I said you're leaving. Get in your ambulance and get out of here before I arrest you for interfering with police business." David felt like he was in a nightmare. In 8 years as a paramedic, nothing like this had ever happened. He looked around at the other emergency responders, hoping someone would speak up. The fire captain looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. The other police officers at the scene were avoiding eye contact. "Officer, please, just let me treat the patients and then we can sort this out later." "There's nothing to sort out. You don't belong here. This is a police scene and I want you gone." David realized that arguing wasn't going to help Jenny or the other injured people. He needed to find another way. He pulled out his radio and called his supervisor. "Base, this is Unit 47. I need a supervisor at my location immediately. We have a situation." Officer Walsh grabbed for David's radio. "You're not calling anyone. Give me that radio." "Sir, this is my equipment. You can't take it. I can do whatever I want. You're interfering with a police investigation." The tension was getting higher by the minute. More people were recording with their phones. David could hear sirens in the distance as more emergency vehicles arrived. Lisa tried to de-escalate the situation. "Officer Walsh, maybe we can just focus on helping these injured people first and then discuss whatever concerns you have." "I already told you to stay out of this," Officer Walsh snapped at her. David's supervisor, Captain Martinez, arrived on scene and immediately saw what was happening. He had been David's supervisor for 5 years and knew him to be professional and competent. "What's the situation here?" Captain Martinez asked. Officer Walsh immediately started talking. "This individual is interfering with my accident investigation. I've asked him to leave multiple times and he's refusing." Captain Martinez looked confused. "David, what's going on?" "Captain, I was treating a patient with possible spinal injuries when Officer Walsh told me to stop. The patient needs immediate medical attention." Captain Martinez looked at the accident scene, then back at Officer Walsh. "Officer, these are my paramedics. They're supposed to be here. This is what they do. I don't care who they are. I want them off my scene." "Your scene? This is a medical emergency. My people have a job to do." The situation was spiraling out of control. Jenny was still trapped in her car, getting worse by the minute. The other patients were being treated by the fire department EMTs, but David was the most experienced paramedic on scene. Officer Walsh pulled out his handcuffs. "If this individual doesn't leave right now, I'm placing him under arrest." Captain Martinez stepped between them. "Officer Walsh, I think we need to call your supervisor. This situation is getting out of hand." "My supervisor will back me up. This individual has no business being here." David couldn't take it anymore. He looked at Jenny in the car, barely conscious now, and made a decision. He started walking toward her, planning to provide medical care regardless of what Officer Walsh said. "Stop right there!" Officer Walsh yelled, moving to block his path again. "That woman is dying. I'm not going to stand here and watch it happen. You'll do what I tell you to do." The confrontation had attracted the attention of everyone on scene. Traffic reporters and helicopters overhead were broadcasting the incident live. The video that people were taking with their phones was already being uploaded to social media. Captain Martinez tried one more time to reason with Officer Walsh. "Look, let's just focus on saving lives here. We can sort out any jurisdictional issues later." "There are no jurisdictional issues. I'm in charge of this scene and I want this individual removed. David looked around at all the faces staring at him. Fellow first responders who knew he was just trying to do his job. Citizens who had stopped to help and couldn't understand why he wasn't being allowed to treat the injured people. David woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. He had barely slept, replaying the events from the accident scene over and over in his mind. In 8 years as a paramedic, he had never experienced anything like what happened with Officer Walsh. He made his coffee and checked his phone. The video of the confrontation had gone viral overnight. His phone had dozens of missed calls and text messages from friends, family, and co-workers who had seen the footage online. The video was everywhere. Local news stations were running the story. Social media was buzzing with comments and shares. Most people were supportive, expressing outrage at how David had been treated. But seeing himself in that situation, broadcast for the whole world to see, made him feel exposed and vulnerable. His wife, Carmen, came into the kitchen and put her arms around him. They had been married for 12 years, and she had supported him through his entire career in emergency medical services. "How are you feeling, honey?" she asked softly. "I keep thinking about that woman, Jenny. I hope she's okay. I should have fought harder to stay and help her. You did everything you could. That police officer was completely out of line." David's phone buzzed with another call. It was his supervisor, Captain Martinez. "David, I need you to come in early today. We need to talk about what happened yesterday." "Of course, Captain. I'll be there in an hour." "Actually, don't come to the station. Meet me at headquarters downtown, 3rd floor, conference room B." David felt a knot forming in his stomach. Meeting at headquarters was never a good sign. That's where the serious disciplinary meetings happened. "Is everything okay, Captain?" "Just come in, David. We'll talk when you get here." The drive to headquarters felt like the longest 20 minutes of David's life. He had worked so hard to build his career, to earn the respect of his colleagues and supervisors. The thought that one incident with a hostile police officer might derail everything he had worked for was terrifying. When he arrived at headquarters, David was surprised to see several cars in the parking lot that he recognized. Captain Martinez's car was there, but so was Deputy Chief Johnson's car and the union representative's vehicle. David took the elevator to the 3rd floor, his heart pounding with each floor they passed. When he reached conference room B, he knocked on the door. "Come in," Captain Martinez called out. Inside the room were Captain Martinez, Deputy Chief Johnson, and Tony Williams from the Paramedics Union. The atmosphere was tense, and no one was smiling. "David, please sit down," Deputy Chief Johnson said, gesturing to a chair across from them. David sat down, trying to read the expressions on their faces. Captain Martinez looked uncomfortable. Deputy Chief Johnson looked stern and official. Tony Williams looked angry, which was unusual for the normally calm union representative. "David," Deputy Chief Johnson began, "we need to discuss what happened yesterday at the accident scene." "Of course. I'm happy to explain my side of what happened. We've reviewed the incident report filed by Officer Walsh, and we've also seen the video that's been circulating online." David felt a small sense of relief. If they had seen the video, then they knew he hadn't done anything wrong. "The video clearly shows that I was just trying to do my job. That police officer was completely out of line." Deputy Chief Johnson opened a folder on the table. "According to Officer Walsh's report, you were insubordinate, refused to follow lawful orders, and interfered with a police investigation. That's not what happened at all. I was treating an injured patient. That's my job. The report states that you became belligerent when asked to leave the scene and that you threatened Officer Walsh." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I never threatened anyone. I was completely professional the entire time. The video proves that." Tony Williams, the union rep, spoke up. "Deputy Chief, I've watched that video multiple times. David never raised his voice, never made any threats, and was clearly just trying to provide medical care. The city has made a decision," Deputy Chief Johnson said, ignoring Tony's comment. "Effective immediately, David Rodriguez is terminated from his position with the Emergency Medical Services Department." The words hit David like a physical blow. He felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Terminated for what? For doing my job?" for insubordination and failure to follow proper protocol. What protocol? I followed every protocol exactly as I was trained to do. Captain Martinez finally spoke up. David, I'm sorry. This decision came from above me. Way above me. Tony Williams was shaking his head in disbelief. This is insane. You're firing one of the best paramedics in the department because some cop had a power trip? The decision has been made, Deputy Chief Johnson said firmly. David, you need to turn in your badge, your radio, and any department equipment you have with you. David sat in stunned silence for a moment. This couldn't be happening. He had given 8 years of his life to this job. He had saved countless lives, worked holidays and weekends, missed family dinners and birthday parties, all in service to his community. I want to file a grievance, David said quietly. That's your right, Deputy Chief Johnson replied, but the termination is effective immediately. David slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge. It was a small piece of metal, but it represented everything he had worked for. He set it on the table. Next came his radio, then his department ID card. Each item felt like he was giving away a piece of himself. I need you to clean out your locker and return any other department property. Deputy Chief Johnson continued. Security will escort you. Security? David asked. You're treating me like a criminal? It's standard procedure for terminations. Tony Williams stood up. This is wrong, and you know it. We'll be filing an appeal, and we'll be going to the media. That's your choice, Deputy Chief Johnson said. But the decision stands. David felt numb as he walked down to the locker room with a security guard following him. Other paramedics and EMTs stared as he packed his personal belongings into a cardboard box. Some tried to talk to him, but the security guard told them to keep their distance. Lisa, his partner, came running when she heard what was happening. David, this is crazy. Everyone knows you didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you need to step back, the security guard said. Step back? He's my partner. He's my friend. David looked at Lisa with tears in his eyes. It's okay, Lisa. Don't make this harder than it has to be. This isn't over, David. Everyone in this department knows you're a good paramedic. We're not going to let them get away with this. David finished packing his belongings and was escorted out of the building, where he had worked for 8 years. The security guard walked him all the way to his car, making sure he left the property. As David sat in his car in the parking lot, he called Carmen to tell her what had happened. They fired you? Carmen's voice was full of disbelief. For what? For doing my job. For trying to help an injured person. This is insane, David. Can they really do this? Apparently they can. David's phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters wanting to interview him about the viral video. But he wasn't ready to talk to the media yet. He needed time to process what had just happened. He drove home slowly, taking the long way through the neighborhoods he had served for 8 years. He passed the hospital where he had brought countless patients. He drove by the schools where he had given safety presentations to children. He saw the fire stations where he had worked, alongside firefighters and other emergency responders. All of that was gone now. 8 years of building relationships, earning trust and making a difference in his community, had been erased in one meeting that lasted 15 minutes. When he got home, Carmen was waiting for him with their 2 children, 8-year-old Sophia and 10-year-old Miguel. The kids knew something was wrong but didn't understand what had happened. Daddy, are you okay? Sophia asked, hugging his leg. I'm okay, sweetheart. Daddy just had a difficult day at work. That evening, David's phone rang. It was Tony Williams, the union representative. David, I've been making calls all afternoon. This termination stinks to high heaven. There are people downtown who are very unhappy about how this was handled. What do you mean? I mean, there were phone calls made, pressure was applied, someone wanted you gone, and they made it happen fast. Who would want me gone? I've never had any problems with anyone. That's what we're going to find out. I've already been in touch with some civil rights attorneys. They think you might have a case. A case for what? Wrongful termination, civil rights violations, maybe more. David felt a spark of hope for the first time all day. Do you really think so? I know so. What happened to you yesterday and today isn't normal. Good paramedics don't get fired for doing their job. Something else is going on here. After David hung up with Tony, he sat on his couch with Carmen and watched the news coverage of his story. The video of the confrontation with Officer Walsh was playing on every local station. Legal experts were being interviewed, and most of them said David had done nothing wrong. But seeing it all play out on television made David feel even worse. His personal and professional humiliation was now public entertainment. "I should have handled it differently," he said to Carmen. "You handled it exactly right. You stayed calm, you were professional, and you tried to help an injured person. That's who you are, David." While David Rodriguez was dealing with the shock of losing his job, a very different kind of meeting was taking place in a secure federal building downtown. Agent Sarah Chen sat at a long conference table surrounded by stacks of files, photographs, and computer printouts. Across from her sat Agent Michael Thompson, her partner in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. "This Rodriguez incident might be exactly what we've been waiting for," Agent Chen said, pointing to a screenshot of the viral video on her laptop. Agent Thompson nodded, flipping through a thick file labeled Officer Derek Walsh, Investigation. "We've been building this case for 18 months. Walsh's name keeps coming up, but until now we haven't had anything this clear-cut. The federal investigation into Officer Walsh and his police department had begun almost 2 years earlier when the Civil Rights Division received multiple complaints about a pattern of excessive force and discriminatory treatment in the city. What started as routine inquiries had gradually revealed something much more serious." Agent Chen pulled out a timeline she had been working on for months. "Look at this pattern. March 2023, Walsh arrests a black teenager for disorderly conduct. After the kid asked for directions, the charges were dropped, but not before the kid spent 3 days in jail. June 2023, Agent Thompson continued, reading from his notes. Walsh pulls over a Hispanic family, claims their car matches the description of a stolen vehicle, searches the car illegally, finds nothing, but writes them tickets for multiple minor infractions. September 2023, Walsh responds to a domestic disturbance call in a predominantly black neighborhood. Instead of investigating the actual complaint, he arrests the person who called for help, claiming they were interfering with police business. The pattern was clear to the federal agents, but proving it in court required more than just a series of suspicious incidents. They needed evidence of intent, of a deliberate pattern of civil rights violations. The Rodriguez case might provide that evidence. Agent Chen opened another file. "We've been monitoring Walsh's social media accounts and electronic communications. With a federal warrant, what we've found is disturbing." She showed Agent Thompson screenshots of text messages Walsh had sent to other officers. The messages contained racial slurs and derogatory comments about minorities in the community. There were jokes about teaching certain people their place and references to keeping the community clean. "This is bad," Agent Thompson said, reviewing the messages. "But it gets worse." Agent Chen pulled out another set of documents. Walsh has been in communication with members of a known hate group that operates in 3 states. They've been sharing tactics for harassing minority communities while avoiding legal consequences. The hate group, which called itself the Brotherhood of Patriots, had been on the FBI's radar for years. They promoted white supremacist ideologies and encouraged members who worked in law enforcement to use their positions to intimidate and harass minorities. According to our intelligence, Walsh attended 2 of their meetings in the past year, Agent Thompson explained. He drove 3 hours to a farm outside the state to attend what they called training seminars on constitutional law enforcement. Training. Seminars that were actually workshops on how to violate civil rights without getting caught, Agent Chen added. The federal agents had been building their case carefully, using surveillance, undercover work, and electronic monitoring. But they needed a clear-cut incident that would demonstrate Walsh's pattern of behavior in a way that a jury could understand. The David Rodriguez incident was perfect. It was captured on video, it showed Walsh clearly abusing his authority, and it resulted in measurable harm to an innocent person. Even better, it had attracted national attention. making it impossible for local authorities to cover up or minimize. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with a text message from her supervisor. Grand jury approved the warrants. You're authorized to move forward. Agent Thompson smiled. It's about time. The warrants they had been seeking for months included authorization to arrest Walsh, search his home and vehicles, and seize his electronic devices. They also had warrants for several other officers who had been working with Walsh and participating in the pattern of civil rights violations. What's our timeline? Agent Thompson asked. We move tomorrow morning. SWAT team will handle the arrest. At Walsh's house. We'll coordinate searches of his workplace and vehicle simultaneously. What about Rodriguez? Do we bring him in first? I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning before we make the arrest. I want to prep him for what's about to happen and make sure he's protected. The federal investigation had uncovered that Walsh wasn't working alone. At least 3 other officers in his department were involved in the systematic harassment of minorities. 2 supervisors had been aware of complaints about Walsh's behavior but had failed to investigate or take action. Agent Chen pulled out surveillance, photos showing Walsh meeting with other officers at a diner outside of town. These meetings weren't official police business. They were planning sessions. Planning what? How to target specific individuals and communities. They had lists, Thompson. Actual lists of people they wanted to harass. The lists included the names of local civil rights activists, minority business owners, and community leaders who had spoken out against police misconduct. David Rodriguez wasn't on the list, but his termination fit the pattern perfectly. Agent Thompson reviewed the electronic evidence they had gathered. Walsh's internet search history is particularly damning. He's been researching legal ways to prevent minorities from accessing public services. And he's been sharing information with other officers in different cities. This might be bigger than just one police department. The scope of the investigation had been expanding as the federal agents uncovered more evidence. What had started as a local civil rights investigation was revealing a network of law enforcement officers who were deliberately violating the constitutional rights of minority citizens. Agent Chen's supervisor, Assistant Director Williams, joined the meeting to review the final preparations for the next day's operation. Are we confident in the evidence? He asked. Absolutely, Agent Chen replied. We have documented patterns of behavior, electronic evidence of intent, and now we have a clear-cut case with video evidence and measurable damages. What about the local police department's cooperation? Agent Thompson laughed bitterly. What cooperation? The chief of police terminated the victim instead of investigating the officer. They're either complicit or incompetent. That's why we're handling this at the federal level, Assistant Director Williams said. Local authorities have shown they can't or won't address this problem. The federal agents had been working with prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure their case was bulletproof. Civil rights violations were serious federal crimes, carrying potential sentences of decades in prison. The U.S. Attorney is confident we can get convictions on multiple counts, Agent Chen reported. Civil rights violations under color of law, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, and potentially RICO charges if we can prove this network extends to other jurisdictions. RICO charges, typically used against organized crime, could be applied if the federal agents could prove that Walsh and his associates were operating as a criminal enterprise under the cover of law enforcement. Agent Thompson pulled out a map, showing incidents in neighboring counties. I think we can prove it. Look at these patterns in 3 different police departments. Same tactics, same targets, and we have evidence of communication between the officers involved. The investigation had revealed that Walsh's hate group connections extended to law enforcement officers in other areas. They had been sharing information and coordinating their activities across jurisdictional lines. If we can prove that, we're looking at federal conspiracy charges that could put these guys away for life, Assistant Director Williams said. Agent Chen checked her watch. I need to prepare for tomorrow's interview with Rodriguez. He's been through enough, but his testimony is going to be crucial. How much are we telling him? Enough to prepare him for what's coming, but not enough to compromise the investigation. He deserves to know that justice is coming, though. The federal agents had been watching Walsh's behavior closely since the Rodriguez incident. Instead of laying low, Walsh had been bragging about getting the paramedic fired. He had sent text messages to his associates celebrating his victory and discussing future targets. Walsh thinks he won, Agent Thompson observed. He has no idea what's about to hit him. Agent Chen gathered up the files and evidence she would need for the next day's operations. By this time tomorrow, Walsh will be in federal custody, and Rodriguez will have his job back. What about the other officers involved? We'll be arresting them simultaneously. 5 officers total, plus 2 supervisors who failed to act on complaints. The coordinated arrests would send a clear message to law enforcement officers throughout the region that civil rights violations would not be tolerated. The FBI had been planning the operation for weeks, ensuring that all suspects would be arrested before they could destroy evidence or warn each other. Agent Thompson reviewed the search warrant for Walsh's house. We're particularly interested in his computer and phone records. If he's been... David Rodriguez was having coffee with Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI field office when his phone rang with the call that would change everything. It was exactly 9:47 a.m. when Captain Martinez's name appeared on his caller ID. I should probably take this, David told Agent Chen, who nodded and gestured for him to answer. David? Captain Martinez's voice sounded strange, almost shaky. I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me first. What's going on, Captain? The City Council held an emergency meeting this morning. You're being reinstated. Immediately. Full back pay, full benefits, and a formal apology. David nearly dropped his phone. Agent Chen leaned forward, watching his expression change from confusion to disbelief. Reinstated? What happened? Yesterday they were treating me like a criminal. David, there's more. Officer Walsh has been arrested by the FBI. Federal agents are at his house right now. David looked at Agent Chen, who was checking her watch and nodding. It was exactly 20 minutes since he had received that termination call 24 hours earlier. Arrested for what? Civil rights violations, conspiracy, a whole bunch of federal charges. David, this is bigger than just what happened to you. Agent Chen took the phone from David's hand. Captain Martinez? This is FBI Agent Chen. Mr. Rodriguez is with us right now, and we need to keep this conversation brief for security reasons. Agent Chen? Are you the one who arrested Walsh? Among others, yes. Mr. Rodriguez will need to call you back later today. Right now we need to focus on his safety and the ongoing investigation. After Agent Chen hung up, David sat in stunned silence for a moment. 20 minutes, he said quietly. What? It's been exactly 20 minutes since I got fired yesterday, and now I'm getting my job back. How is that even possible? Agent Chen smiled. Federal law enforcement moves quickly when we have solid evidence and sufficient cause. At that exact moment, 3 miles away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Officer Derek Walsh was experiencing the worst morning of his life. He had been sleeping soundly when the sound of vehicles surrounding his house woke him up. Walsh lived in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, the kind of neighborhood where nothing exciting ever happened. His neighbors were mostly middle-class families with kids and dogs and well-maintained lawns. That peaceful suburban quiet was shattered at 9:47 a.m. when 6 black SUVs surrounded Walsh's house. FBI SWAT team members in full tactical gear emerged from the vehicles and took positions around the property. FBI, search warrant. Come out with your hands visible. The voice from the megaphone echoed through the neighborhood. Walsh stumbled out of bed and looked out his bedroom window. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Armed federal agents were positioned behind his car, near his mailbox, and along his fence line. This has to be a mistake, he mumbled to himself, pulling on a bathrobe. Derek Walsh, exit the front door immediately with your hands raised. Walsh's mind was racing. He had no idea why federal agents would be at his house. As far as he knew, he hadn't done anything that would warrant FBI attention. He opened his front door slowly, raising his hands as instructed. I'm Derek Walsh, what's going on here? Agent Michael Thompson approached with handcuffs ready. Derek Walsh, you are under arrest for violations of federal civil rights laws under Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. What? That's impossible. I'm a police officer. You were a police officer. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Agent Thompson read Walsh his Miranda rights, other FBI agents were entering his house with a search warrant. They had authorization to seize computers, phones, documents, and any other evidence related to civil rights violations. Walsh's neighbors had started to gather on their porches and sidewalks, watching the dramatic arrest unfold. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, was recording everything with her phone. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." "I want to call my lawyer right now," Walsh said as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You'll have that opportunity at the federal building." Walsh was placed in the back of one of the FBI vehicles while agents continued to search his house. Through the car window, he could see them carrying out boxes of evidence, including his computer and several phones. "This is insane," Walsh said to Agent Thompson, who was sitting in the front seat. "I don't know what you think I did, but this is all a mistake." Agent Thompson turned around to look at him. "Officer Walsh, we have 18 months of evidence against you, text messages, social media posts, witness statements, and video evidence. This is not a mistake." 18 months? What are you talking about? "We've been investigating your pattern of civil rights violations for 18 months. The incident with David Rodriguez was just the final piece we needed." Walsh felt his stomach drop. If the FBI had been investigating him for 18 months, that meant they had been watching him, monitoring his communications, building a case against him all this time. "I want my lawyer." "You'll get your lawyer. But first, you're going to hear exactly what you're being charged with." The FBI convoy left Walsh's neighborhood with him in custody, heading for the federal building downtown. Behind them, agents continued to search his house, finding exactly what they had expected to find. Agent Jennifer Martinez was leading the search of Walsh's home office. She had been part of the investigation team from the beginning and knew exactly what to look for. "Computer's password protected, but our tech team will crack it," she reported over her radio. "Any physical documents?" Agent Chen's voice crackled back. "Lots of them. Looks like he kept printed copies of communications with other officers, and there's something else." Agent Martinez had found a filing cabinet in Walsh's basement that contained what appeared to be intelligence files on local minority community leaders. "This is a target list," she said into her radio. "Names, addresses, places of work, family information. He's been stalking these people." The target list contained information on civil rights activists, minority business owners, and community leaders who had spoken out against police misconduct. It also contained information about their families, including where their children went to school. "How many names?" Agent Chen asked. "At least 50, maybe more." While agents were searching Walsh's house, simultaneous arrests were taking place across the city. 4 other police officers who had been working with Walsh were taken into custody at the same time. Officer Brian Murphy was arrested at his apartment complex. Officer Lisa Santos was arrested at a coffee shop where she had been having breakfast. Officer Kevin Johnson was arrested at the police station where he had just started his shift. Each arrest was coordinated precisely to prevent any of the suspects from warning the others or destroying evidence. But the biggest surprise arrest was Police Captain Robert Miller, Walsh's immediate supervisor, who was taken into custody at his home in front of his wife and teenage children. Captain Miller had been aware of complaints about Walsh's behavior for over a year, but had failed to investigate or take any disciplinary action. According to the FBI's investigation, he had actively covered up evidence of Walsh's misconduct. "This is wrong," Miller shouted as he was handcuffed in his driveway. "I'm being railroaded." "Captain Miller," Agent Thompson said calmly, "we have documented evidence that you received at least 15 complaints about Officer Walsh's conduct and failed to investigate any of them. Those were minor complaints. Nothing serious. One of those complaints alleged that Walsh had made racist comments to a Hispanic family during a traffic stop. You marked it as unsubstantiated, without interviewing any witnesses." Miller fell silent as he realized the FBI knew far more about his actions than he had imagined. By 11 a.m., all 6 suspects were in federal custody. The speed and coordination of the arrests had been designed to prevent any destruction of evidence or witness intimidation. Deputy Police Chief Henderson called an emergency press conference as news of the arrests began to spread. Earlier this morning, federal agents arrested 6 members of our department on various charges. The city is cooperating fully with the FBI investigation. Reporters immediately started shouting questions. Deputy Chief, is this related to the viral video of the paramedic being fired? Was the FBI investigating your department? How long have you known about problems with these officers? Henderson looked uncomfortable as he tried to answer the barrage of questions. The city was not aware of any federal investigation until this morning. We are committed to cooperating with law enforcement and ensuring that justice is served. What about David Rodriguez? Will he get his job back? Mr. Rodriguez has already been reinstated with full pay and benefits. The city deeply regrets any inconvenience he has experienced. Back at the FBI field office, David Rodriguez was meeting with federal prosecutors to discuss his role as a witness in the upcoming trial. Mr. Rodriguez, Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Williams explained, your case is just one part of a much larger prosecution. We're charging these officers with conspiracy to violate civil rights under federal law. How long could they go to prison for? The charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison, though realistically we expect sentences in the range of 10 to 20 years for most defendants. 3 months after Officer Walsh's dramatic arrest, David Rodriguez stood at a podium in the city council chambers, looking out at a packed room of reporters, community members, and fellow first responders. The mayor was about to present him with the city's highest civilian honor, but David's mind was on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and personal growth that David never could have imagined. What started as the worst day of his career had somehow transformed into a catalyst for change that extended far beyond his own life. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Patricia Johnson announced, it is my honor to present the Distinguished Service Medal to Paramedic David Rodriguez, whose courage and professionalism in the face of injustice has made our entire community safer and more just. The applause was thunderous, but David felt overwhelmed by the attention. He had always been a behind-the-scenes kind of person, someone who preferred saving lives quietly rather than being in the spotlight. Thank you, Mayor Johnson, David began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. 3 months ago, I thought, my career was over because I tried to help an injured person. Today I'm standing here because our justice system works when people refuse to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. In the audience, Agent Sarah Chen smiled as she watched David speak. The federal case against Walsh and his associates had proceeded faster than anyone expected, largely because the evidence was so overwhelming. Walsh had initially tried to fight the charges, claiming he was just doing his job, and that his treatment of David was within his authority as a police officer. But when federal prosecutors presented 18 months of documented evidence, including his text messages with hate groups and his systematic targeting of minority citizens, Walsh's defense crumbled. The evidence against Officer Walsh was so clear-cut that his own attorney recommended he accept a plea deal. Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Williams had explained to David the week before. Walsh ultimately pleaded guilty to conspiracy to violate civil rights under federal law, accepting a sentence of 15 years in federal prison. His 4 officer co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years, depending on their level of involvement. But the biggest surprise had been Police Captain Robert Miller, Walsh's supervisor, who received a 20-year sentence for his role in covering up the misconduct and enabling the conspiracy to continue. Miller's sentence was actually longer than Walsh's because he was in a position of authority and failed to stop the abuse, Agent Chen had explained. Federal judges take that kind of betrayal of public trust very seriously. The federal investigation had also uncovered connections to similar misconduct in 3 other cities, leading to additional arrests and prosecutions that were still ongoing. David continued his speech to the packed council chambers. But this award isn't really about me. It's about every person who has ever been treated unfairly and wondered if speaking up would make a difference. In the back of the room, Jenny Martinez, the woman David had been trying to help at the car accident, wiped away tears as she listened. She had made a full recovery from her injuries thanks to the medical care she eventually received, and had become one of David's strongest supporters. "That man saved my life twice," she had told reporters. "Once when he tried to help me at the accident scene, and again when he refused to let that officer's racism go unchallenged." The civil lawsuit that David had filed against the city had been settled quickly and quietly for an undisclosed amount. More importantly, the settlement included a comprehensive agreement for police reform and civil rights training that would affect the entire department. The city has agreed to implement bias training for all officers, establish an independent civilian review board for misconduct complaints, and create a zero-tolerance policy for civil rights violations, David's attorney had announced at a press conference. But the changes extended far beyond just policy reforms. The viral video of David's confrontation with Walsh had sparked a national conversation about racism in emergency services and the need for better protection for minority first responders. David had been invited to speak at conferences across the country, sharing his story with other paramedics, EMTs, and firefighters who had faced similar discrimination. "I've received hundreds of messages from first responders who have experienced racism on the job," David told the council chamber audience. "Many of them were afraid to speak up because they thought it would end their careers. I hope my story shows them that staying silent is more dangerous than speaking out." After the ceremony, David drove to the firehouse where he had worked before the incident. His relationship with his colleagues had been complicated by all the media attention, but most of them had been supportive throughout the ordeal. Captain Martinez, his supervisor, greeted him with a warm handshake. "How does it feel to be famous, Rodriguez?" "Honestly, I'd rather just go back to saving lives quietly." "That's what makes you a good paramedic," Captain Martinez replied. "But like it or not, you've become a symbol of something important." David's partner, Lisa, had been promoted to training supervisor and was now responsible for implementing the new bias awareness training for all emergency medical services personnel. "Your situation opened a lot of people's eyes," she told David, over coffee after his shift. "We had officers and paramedics who didn't even realize their own biases were affecting how they did their jobs. I'm glad something positive came out of it, but I still think about that day and wonder if I could have handled it differently." "David, you handled it perfectly. You stayed professional, you tried to help an injured person, and you didn't let that officer intimidate you. That's exactly what we're trained to do." The training program Lisa was implementing had become a model for other cities across the country. It focused on recognizing unconscious bias, de-escalating tense situations between different agencies, and protecting the rights of both emergency responders and the people they serve. "We've had departments from 12 different states ask for copies of our training materials," Lisa reported. "Your case study is being used in emergency medical services schools nationwide." David's story had also caught the attention of federal policymakers. He had been invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on civil rights in emergency services. "Mr. Rodriguez," Congresswoman Angela Davis had said during his testimony, "your experience highlights a problem that many minority first responders face, but few are willing to discuss publicly. Congresswoman, I didn't choose to become a public figure, but if my experience can help other people avoid what I went through, then I'm willing to share it." The congressional hearing had led to proposed federal legislation that would provide additional protections for first responders who report civil rights violations and create federal oversight of local emergency services departments. But perhaps the most meaningful change for David had been personal. The experience had made him more confident in his own voice and more committed to advocating for others. "I used to think my job was just to show up, treat patients, and go home," he told Carmen one evening as they sat on their porch watching their children play. "Now I realize that sometimes being a first responder means standing up for what's right even when it's difficult." Carmen squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, but I'm also glad the worst part is over." "Is it over, though? I mean, Walsh is in prison, but the problems he represented are still out there." David had been receiving messages from first responders across the country who were dealing with similar situations. Some were facing discrimination from their own colleagues. Others were being retaliated against for reporting misconduct. "I feel like I have a responsibility to help them," David said. You can't save everyone, David. You've already done more than anyone could expect. But David had started working with civil rights organizations to create a support network for first responders facing discrimination. The network provided legal resources, emotional support, and practical advice for people in situations similar to what he had experienced. The goal is to make sure no one has to face this kind of retaliation alone, he explained to a group of volunteers at the network's first meeting. The network had already helped 3 paramedics in other cities who were facing retaliation for reporting racist behavior by police officers. In each case, the network's legal resources and media support had helped resolve the situation before it escalated to David's level. Your case created a precedent, explained attorney Maria Gonzalez, who had helped establish the network. Other first responders can point to your situation and say, this is what happens when civil rights are violated. Federal law enforcement gets involved. The precedent had been powerful. Several police departments had quietly disciplined or transferred officers after complaints from paramedics and EMTs, rather than risk the kind of federal investigation that had destroyed Walsh's career. 6 months after the incident, David received an unexpected phone call from Officer Walsh's former partner, Detective Kevin Brown. Mr. Rodriguez, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to apologize to you personally.